with more Maximum College Basketball. I'm Ramon Scott, and I'm joined by Maxwell Smart from Toronto, Canada. And Max, thanks for doing this again. I know we've kept our viewers waiting a little bit, but we're going to cover another five-pack today on the show. UC Irvine, Pepperdine, New Mexico, Eastern Washington, and GCU. Max, the University of California Irvine Anteaters are back this year with head coach Russell Turner. Hey, they got one of my guys on the team, Max, that I want to hear you talk about as well. A kid from down here in San Diego, Tommy Rutherford. I bet he's in store for a big, big season. Let me hear it on UC Irvine.
Yeah, Ramon, UC Irvine obviously was a very impressive team for us last year, and anybody that was watching Big West basketball late when they're on the East Coast or regular time if you're on the left coast knew that this team was a moneymaker. Not only did they have a 17-game winning streak throughout the season, which started with a win against Cal State Northridge and ended in the March Madness NCAA tournament versus the Oregon Ducks. So a fantastic season by UC Irvine. And I will point out that in the game against Oregon, the one player that they did lose to Arizona as a grad transfer, Max Hazard, even though he has a great name named Max, he had a terrible shooting game. And it left us with a lot of positive feelings about what this new upperclassman backcourt and what this new up-and-coming front-court player in Colin Welp could possibly do. And I'm excited to watch this team. Russell Turner has done a great job with this team. They play solid defense. They play slow pace. And they're able to score efficiently. I think that when you allow less than 64 points a game to every opponent that you played throughout the season, that speaks volumes. Having an average scoring margin of 8 points means that they were a little chalky. They did have a lot of favorite lines, but they were cashing for their bettors. I will point out there were 3 very nice games that they were able to first get lined as dogs and second cash as dogs. Plus 168 versus Texas A&M, plus 236 versus St. Mary's, and then plus 157 versus K-State in the NCAA tournament.
Max, this is really what this team has worked for. I mean, that group now, they're all seniors. I mean, when those guys started together, they built this defense, really. That's what the Anteaters are kind of built on. So this is really it for them. They got a nice little program. I don't want to downplay them a bit, but this year, this is what this group has worked for.
I think that that's exactly the same sentiment that I share, Ramon. I will point out that losing Jonathan Galloway and Elston Jones are big losses in the front court. And your guy from San Diego, Tommy Rutherford, he's going to have to step up. I thought that Tommy Rutherford played fantastic in the limited minutes that he played last season. He was around a 20-minute-a-game front court player. And I just look at the games against Cal Baptist and Cal Poly where he was able to put up 14-6 and 14-7, shooting over 50% from the field as an indicator of what he can do with some more minutes. And I think he's going to get them this year. He's going to be playing aside a very standout player in Colin Welp. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on Tommy Rutherford, Ramon.
Well, I've always liked his work ethic, and I like his desire to win. And he seems to like to do exactly what it takes in his role to make the team better. I mean, he's a role player to a certain extent. I think he's in for big minutes now. I think, given how the team looks, in the backcourt, I mean, they really need guys to kind of step up in the front court. I don't know what, with Galloway being gone now, so they're looking for guys like Rutherford possibly to step up in that role. I mean, they've got the guards. Evan Leonard, I mean, Max, guy shoots over 40% from three-point range. He does give them that threat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that him and Worku are going to be a solid in-game and game-out tangible backcourt that is going to be able to produce points. It's going to make good decisions with the ball and not foul. I will point out, though, that this is a team that has lost a lot of its defensive identity, and they're going to have to rediscover that with the new pieces that they brought in. There's a bunch of freshmen that are coming in. I will highlight that Emmanuel Tishmanga, he is the prototypical center. He is definitely coming in a little more highly touted. And I think that he can make a serious impact in the role that Tommy Rutherford played last season. I will have to point out that Colin Welp, the 6'9" sophomore, he is the X factor for this team. He's the must step up player. He has to assume the defensive and offensive role that Jonathan Galway and Elson Jones are vacating now. With I believe it was about 14 points a game that they were able to contribute. So you know what? Along those lines, I think that UC Irvine will be okay. They are coached well, and I actually do have 4 games that I think that in the non-conference schedule that we're going to be able to find some value in from a variety of different ways. I will point out, however, that one of the things that I was betting on this team last year was when their totals were in between 134 and 137, I was jumping on unders. I look for something along those lines to continue. I'll see how the games are lined. I think that based on a couple of these opponents that I'm going to talk about, 2 of them, one being Eastern Michigan and the second being Boise State, I think that both these games can be rock fights. I think that both these games can be ugly offensive games where UC Irvine flexes its hopefully newfound defensive muscle and crushes, hopefully, as chalk in Eastern Michigan. Boise State, they could be a small dog in.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned the long winning streak, but they also got off to a really good start in November last year. So I think that might be, kind of where you're headed. I mean, teams that are playing defense early, I really like that. You mentioned Colin Welp, and I'm so old, Max. I mean, I remember his dad, Christian Welp. He was the 1986 Pac-10 Player of the Year. So I think the bloodlines are there for Colin Welp. I mean, I don't want to date myself, but I think he'll be fine. He's just a sophomore right now, so I see him coming along just fine. And they also have J.C. Butler. He's the son of Karan Butler. So, they definitely can still attract him out there at Irvine. So did you want to touch on some of the points with those games against Boise and Eastern Michigan?
Yeah.
Boise's on the road, Eastern Michigan's at home, and that's on November 30th. So we're talking about November 15th and November 30th, kind of in the bulk of the November schedule.
Yeah, so Boise State on the road is definitely going to be a test because Boise State's coming in with a lot of onlookers being like, this is a team that can take the next step. With that stupid son of a bitch named Alston, I'm not going to speak his first name because I don't want to freaking give him that much clout. I hope this team falls on its face. I'm going to be betting on UC Irvine because I believe that with their pieces matching up versus Boise State's best pieces and the defensive efficiency numbers compared to Boise State's offensive efficiency numbers, I think that we're going to be able to make a lot of money in this game. I think that if we see UC Irvine plus 3.5, well, I'm getting on the money line. These are the shots that you take with UC Irvine. There is the game against Eastern Michigan. A lot of people are going to be like, well, that's an ugly game. That's a boring game. It's a rematch of last year where UC Irvine went on the road to Eastern Michigan. Obviously, Eastern Michigan
100 points were scored total.
Yes, exactly. Like Eastern Michigan's going to be very ugly this year. They lost a lot of key contributors. They are getting Jordan Dardis back, but I don't think that's going to make a big enough difference. I think UC Irvine, if they're a 17 to 21 point favorite, I think that they're going to cover that versus Eastern Michigan. I don't think that there's going to be any kind of goodwill put towards this home and home series.
Max, last year, this was a historic season for this team. I mean, it really kind of put UC Irvine on the map a little bit, is considering, making it to the second round. That was a huge deal. So yeah. I think for their opponents, they know how good UC Irvine is. But do you think there's still value for us bettors because it's Irvine? Who knows about Irvine, right?
Yeah, I think that obviously in the Boise State game, I think we're going to find value. I think in the game against Harvard on January 4th, I think we're going to find value. Once we get into the conference season, I don't even have UC Irvine as my winner of the Big West.
Whoa!
I have UC Santa Barbara winning that conference. So we'll get into that at a later date. But this is a team that I feel can provide value on totals, on their opponent's team total unders, and I think that they're the type of team that proved last year that they can play when they're laying chalk. So the game against Harvard, that is going to be a incredible test if Harvard is healthy. That's the key word. I don't know if Harvard's going to be healthy. I'm not going to put any kind of definitive freaking line or any kind of definitive fact out there that, well, this is what has to happen for them to beat them. I just think that they have scheduled themselves in the non-conference against teams that provide matchup difficulties, and we're going to see the growth of these players. And I think that against Harvard and Boise State, there'll be tests. They could be dogs in those games. I'd be looking at UC Irvine in those games. Eastern Michigan, that's a game that I look for them to slaughter. And my last one will be about a team that we're going to be talking about in a minute, Pepperdine. Battle of Paces, November 9th. Pepperdine, with their up and down, get on the boards, get in transition, possibly turn the ball over type offense with Colby Ross, and UC Irvine playing rock fight type defense, half court offense, slow it down, maximize use of the shot clock, don't foul. It's going to be a battle of paces, and I look for UC Irvine to hold Pepperdine and keep them shooting poorly. And if that line is anywhere under 144, I'll be jumping on the under on that.
Well, Max, I thought you needed a co-host with you on these shows. It sounds like, you're making your own transition, unless you have anything else to add on my Anteaters, I'll say this year. I certainly want to hear what you have to say about Santa Barbara. We'll save that for another day. If you want to get into these Pepperdine Waves, maybe underachieved last year a little bit, finished just 6-10 in conference, but Lorenzo Romar, the longtime coach, still with the Waves. And they lost that game in the semifinals, the conference semifinals last year. Let me hear about Pepperdine. I'll get into it with you.
Oh, well, listen, Pepperdine was a thorn in my goddamn side last year. They took money out of my pocket, but they were entertaining. They opened my eyes to what Coach Lorenzo Romar is doing there. He came home, went back to frickin' Pep, and obviously he's liking going to that beach at Malibu, having a good time. There's a lot of good-looking women in that city, so it's a good job to have just from a non-basketball factor. But when you have the best point guard in the WCC in Colby Ross, a guy who's going to frickin' put up 20 and 7, a guy who's going to frickin' be responsible for running your offense and getting all your guys involved based on what the matchup advantages are, how can I not be interested in betting on a team like that this year?
Yeah, well, I call it a disappointment just because I'm such a big fan of Romar. Obviously, last year getting 16 wins out of that group, that was a pretty big improvement. And I think they showed their potential once they got to the conference tournament. It just fizzled so bad in conference there on some of those games that maybe that's where I have the concerns. But certainly Ross, one of the best assist men out there, not only in the conference, but in the entire country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he plays with great pace. First off, he's a great free throw shooter. And when you shoot 85% from the line, you're going to impress me. The one area of concern that I will say with Colby Ross and with a lot of point guards, young point guards, turnovers. 4.3 a game is not going to win you any spot in the top 4 in the WCC, and that's what this Pepperdine Wave team is aiming for this year. They want to finish top 4. They want to be in the upper echelon. Well, it starts with Colby Ross, and it starts with his beautiful season from last year. This is a guy that scored in double figures in every game except for one. Okay, he's a consistent guy. 36 points for Pacific, 29 and 9 versus St. Mary's in an overtime win, 27 and 6 for San Diego, your school. And let's not forget he had one very standout performance against Miami, Ohio in the non-conference. 25 points, 11 assists, 11 for 11 from the free throw line. That's the type of point guard that I think can take the next step this year in what I think is a weakened WCC.
Well, and Romar, we know he's great with coaching up guards. He did a great job with Washington coaching up some real top-notch guards up there. They also have a pretty strong guy, Cameron Edwards. Spent a lot of time injured last year, but he should be back, and that should be a big, big help for the Waves.
Yes, absolutely. I think that Cam Edwards, obviously, we saw the best of Cam Edwards in that 4-game, 20-point plus performance where he had 4 20-point plus games, including the game against St. Mary's when he had 24 and 8 and the game against San Diego when he had 23 and 8. Health is obviously the key, like you said, Ramon. But him and his younger brother, Kessler Edwards, these guys can be a goddamn force in the WCC. True bangers.
Yeah, what do you think about Kessler's development?
Yeah, I think that with his brother side by side, it could stall it a little bit. But I personally would want to use him in the second unit. I want to use him separately when I have the opportunity and I have the lead to work with. But in the end, you got to put out your strongest lineup. And the problem with this Pepperdine team is going to be depth. I don't see a lot of guys on this team that can help out scoring wise if Cam and Kessler aren't doing it also.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of young guys. Guys, I'm not sure that I can go that deep. Maybe you can, but just a young bench right now at this point. I mean, they've got some newcomers. A guy came in from Oregon. Got a junior college guy who came in. Chavez played big at Santa Rosa, but just looking over the notes here, and that might be something that Pepperdine's always going to have to fight through a little bit. But I think Romar is kind of the man to do that.
Yeah, I think that he definitely is up to the task because let's not forget, what did Pepperdine do in the conference season? Well, they had 6 wins. They lost 10 games. But for us bettors, which is what we care about most, they were cash and plus tickets. A plus 304 versus San Francisco. Plus 173 and plus 128 versus Loyola Marymount, plus 130 and plus 292 versus San Diego, plus 308 versus frickin' St. Mary's, and they had the Miami, Ohio win plus 145. So this team made you money. This team, I believe, will be able to make us money in the same way that they did last year, this year. I don't think Pepperdine will get the respect from the odds makers in the beginning of the season until they frickin' prove something.
You mentioned your frustration with the Max. Did you just feel you had poor timing with Pepperdine?
I read them wrong. I didn't know Kobe Ross well enough. You know what? They were able to capitalize on bad shooting nights by their opponents. And I think that them on their home court, they're a dangerous team. They're a dangerous team. There's 2 games in the non-conference season that I think that will give us a pretty good perspective of what this Pepperdine team is able to reach. The first game of the year versus Cal State Northridge. They're going to be going up against a unique specimen and Lamine Diani. And we know from watching him last year, he is literally a 30 and 15 guy. He will get you 30 and 15 every game. That's just how he works. His free throw shooting has improved. He's going to be a matchup nightmare for this Pepperdine team. You're going to need a combination of the Edward brothers and possibly even Keith Smith, the Oregon transfer, to be able to play on him and double team him. So I think that we're going to see what they're capable of right on the first night of the season. It's a great test, a great scheduling spot. I'm excited to watch and bet on that game because I'll be betting on the over. I don't give a shit if it's over 155. This is a team in Cal State Northridge that's going to put up 80 and let you score 80. And that's just the bottom line because you know what? Maxwell Smart said so.
Okay, well, I think for Pepperdine, in that conference, a winning season is still the goal. It sounds like you're looking to make your money in the non-conference portion of the schedule. I mean, certainly Gonzaga's way down. We're not talking about a team, maybe expected to contend here. St. Mary's returns just about everybody. So I think the goals for Pepperdine is, especially considering that run they had in the West Coast Conference tournament, just a winning season and try to do some damage possibly in the postseason. I know that they have the experience certainly to do it with Romar.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just finish off on one last point.
Yeah.
USC, November 19th. That will be a game that I think that we're going to find line value. Battle of California, big brother USC, probably is going to get a little overvalued, and I think that we'll be able to capitalize on that as well.
You love to look for chances to bet against Andy Enfield.
Absolutely. I'm just not a fan of his coaching. I love his recruiting. He's a great recruiter.
Well, we're on late tonight. We're keeping it out west, Max. We're heading to Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're headed to the pit. Talk about the University of New Mexico last season, Max, 14 and 18, 7 and 11 in the Mountain West. And well, I tell you, I always have problems betting against them at home. But maybe you can give us some insight as to what you think, especially in the early season with the Lobos and head coach Paul Weir.
Yeah, listen, Paul Weir's going into year 3 of his program. Listen, that zone, it's credible. You know what? You just need the right pieces. You need the right length. I believe they got the right length, and now they got the right guard play. Zane Martin, Jaquan Lyles, both coming into the team this year. I think that they are going to be dynamite additions. Let's talk about Zane Martin for a second. The Towson transfer. Keep it simple that it was at Towson. It wasn't in high major basketball, but the kid just put up freaking points. Like, what did he do? 3 30-point games his last season at Towson, 15, 20-plus point games. This is the kind of guy that can make a big impact in the Mountain West. And we know from watching it last year, guard-heavy league. And I don't think that's going to change with this New Mexico team. But I will say this. They are just bursting with talent and depth at the frickin' seam. It makes me a little bitter, I would say. That's the cleanest word I can use.
You know, guys like Vance Jackson, Carlton Bragg, uh, you know, uh, Corey Manino, it's just some big names. I mean, they've got a lot of guys, coming in there this year. I mean, it's something to behold right now.
Yeah, I definitely think that this is a team that can go 8 or 9 deep, and I think that 8 or 9 deep of quality. When you look at Vance Jackson, I'm a little bitter about Vance because I don't like him having success because he's a former UConn guy. I'm a UConn guy. I love my UConn Huskies, and Vance Jackson should be wearing UConn blue. But that's another topic for another day. The guy averaged 13 and 7, but he shoots 65% from the free throw line, and that's just unacceptable for a guy that you hope it's going to get some high freaking production, lots of touches. We've seen the best of Vance. Vance highlighted his season with games against New Mexico State, Fresno, Wyoming, albeit in losing efforts, putting up 27, 30, and 26 respectively. So I look for him to have these types of outbursts in games that New Mexico wins this year. And obviously New Mexico needs a good start to the season, and they need to avoid slumps of 3 or 4 games where they lose. Jaquan Lyles, there we go, the Ohio State transfer. He has been waiting, he's been waiting. He had to redshirt for a second year because he had an injury. Now he's incorporated into this team. And I think that he's going to unleash his fury for not being on the basketball court in an organized game for this long. I'm very impressed. And listen, we can't talk about front court guys without talking about Carlton Bragg. Carlton Bragg was a bust at Kansas. He came to New Mexico looking for resurgence. And if that guy's going to put up 22 and 20, that's my type of guy. I call that resurgence. Tell me what you think about Carlton Bragg, Ramon.
Well, don't forget, Max, he also played at ASU. Once he came over, I mean, he was an instant starter. So I think that was big, and he plays big. I mean, he's one of the top rebounders in the country, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. At 8.5 rebounds a game, I expect that to go up. I'm actually, I'm forecasting that Carlton Bragg is going to be a 13 and 12 type player. And I think that's very attainable for him. And I think that's a winning recipe. You don't want to be having too much dominance in the front court. You want to be balanced in the Mountain West. There's teams that you can beat with size. There's teams that you can beat with guard play. This New Mexico team has both sides of the coin covered, and I look for them to have some value in some non-conference games, and I look for them to have some very good dog value in the conference. Let's not forget, this is a team that pulled off some pretty nice freaking wins last year at the plus money, and let's not forget they beat my Nevada Wolfpack plus 819 on the money line. that was a hard game to stomach. I had Nevada in that game. I literally wanted to go to New Mexico and light some firecrackers, if you know what I mean.
Well,
And sorry, Ron, go on.
no, just to say, the thing is, New Mexico also has some wild cards on their team. I mean, they've got a couple of foreign imports, if you will. So I think that just adds to the experience and depth, and I think that that's what New Mexico, I think, is kind of getting after this year. Those guys got to work on it because I think that the bench is a bit of a liability for them.
Yeah, with like Jordan Araujo and Drew Dennon and Tavion Percy, these are all guys that didn't really get into game. They didn't get the experience that some of these freshmen do on teams that are more ironclad in the starting lineup and less on the bench. But you got J.J. Caldwell coming in. That could be your backup point guard right there. You know what? He did have some problems at Texas A&M, and I think that this is a good move for him. I think that this is a good landing spot for him. The quality of play, the quality of defense, and the quality of pace. I mean, the pace that is going to be played, I think that suits his skill set a little more. I'm looking for this team to have instant success. I'm looking for them to challenge for the Mountain West. I'm thinking that they're a team that's going to finish third or fourth. I'm looking for them to get invited to a postseason tournament, and this could be a team that wins the CBI. This is a team that can challenge for the NIT. I believe in this team. I don't know about NCAA tournament, but I will say that there is a lot of potential on this team for us bettors.
I think the presence of Lyle gives them that chance to make it to that to the big dance. You can't underestimate a player like that. His contribution that could be. We got to see, how it works out playing a full season like this, and an Achilles injury is nothing to, you got to get back to full speed. But he's got one of the best basketball acumens out there, and I think that people are gonna, once they see Jaquan Lyles on New Mexico, people are going to be onto him real quick. I don't know what part of the schedule, the preseason schedule, you're looking to hit these guys, but that certainly is something I think people are going to notice right away.
Yeah, I've actually narrowed in 3 games, 2 challenging games and a game that I think that they can romp. I'll start with the game that they can romp. They're going to be playing Montana December 1st. I look for them to be laying chalk. I look for them to be able to win this game by 20-plus points. When I look at this Montana team with Saeed Pridgett only coming back, losing Ahmad Rory, losing Jabbar Oka, there's just a lot of freaking weaponry that is not going to be on this Montana team, and I'm just not sure that they can reload that fast before the non-conference season ends. Plus, it is at exam time, and I believe that the teams with more depth at that time are more likely to produce winners for us. I do think that the game against Auburn on November 25th will be a supreme challenge. That game's going to be played in Brooklyn. I think that they can win that game. I think they can go in, they can win that game. I think they're not going to get any respect from the odds makers. And if they do, that line is going to get pushed by the public and all that Auburn money. Everybody wants to see Bruce Pearl succeed. Everybody wants to see Bruce Pearl frickin' win games. And I think that we're going to be able to take advantage of that in that particular game. My last game that I'm looking at specifically right now is the game against UTEP. Everybody is really high on UTEP, including myself, but I don't know on November 19th if UTEP's going to have it all together and gelled with chemistry on court to beat a team that has Carlton Bragg and Vance Jackson in your front court. That's a lot of size, a lot of weight to throw around, and you got to be able to secure your rebounds against a team like that. Otherwise, they'll be feasting all day.
Oh, Max, I mean, the front court's there. It's just going to be, can they get enough, like I said, enough bench, enough depth, if you will. But I think the back court will be the issues for the Lobos. Anybody who doesn't match up well in the front court, that's going to be a good situation, I think, for the Lobos. All right, Max, going to move on now and take a look at those Eastern Washington Eagles. Tell you what, for the Eagles, a pretty good year, I thought, in the Big Sky. I mean, they finished only 16-18 overall, but finished third in the Big Sky with that 12-8 record. And Coach Liggins, he's done a pretty good job over the first 2 years there, I would think. Let me hear what you have to say about Eastern Washington.
Yeah, so Eastern Washington, obviously their issue was a 3-13 start. That's not going to help you. That's not going to make your record look good. And that's probably not going to get you invited to anything prestigious in the month of March. So, what I'll say about this Eastern Washington team, listen, if they can stay healthy with Mason Keeling and Jacob Davison, I think that this team can win the Big Sky. A lot of other people think that also. I just think that when you look at what is very popular in the Big Sky, it's inside out combinations. What did Montana do and dominate the Big Sky for 2 or 3 years? Inside out combinations. And what does Eastern Washington have? Mason Keeling, Jacob Davison, inside out combination. So this is a team obviously that underperformed in non-conference, and we can't blame them. When you're not healthy, the numbers will be skewed. If healthy, I believe that this is a team that is going to have a much better performance, and we're going to be making money on them on the spread. We're not going to have to worry about them freaking coming off and freaking blowing a freaking egg, sucking a donut, and throwing it on the ground, yeah, so.
Well, look, Montana's been a thorn in everybody's side in the Big Sky, but that's not going to happen this year. I mean, Eastern Washington has as good of a chance as anybody. I don't know. I haven't looked at the odds yet on some of these conferences. I imagine that Eastern Washington is right there as one of the favorites.
Yeah, Eastern Washington definitely is a favorite, but we have to keep in mind, this is a team that didn't shoot the ball well. This is a team that didn't freaking shoot the 3 ball well. Didn't defend the 3-point well. They shot the 3-point very well. But like I say all the time, I always say this. Teams that shoot free throws, teams that make free throws, I love those teams. Eastern Washington, they're a team that hits over 70% of their free throws. They have a good floor general in Tyler Kidd. This is a kid that definitely has to worry about other guys trying to steal his spot in the starting lineup, but he's rise to the occasion over and over again. I believe that he'll step up with a year of development. I look for him to be able to at least average maybe 12 to 13 points. So Tyler Kidd's going to be real important, but it's gonna go back to the big boys. The one thing with Mason Keeling is his free throw shooting. He's a 69% free throw shooter. That definitely needs to improve, but he is 58% from the field, and he does have 3 or 4 good back to the basket moves that he can use to finish. We definitely want to highlight his 3 best games. The game against Montana State when he had 28 and 14, Weber State 23 points, 9 for 14 from the field, and the game against Southern Utah, who I think could be a thorn in Eastern Washington's side, but we'll leave that for another show. He had 20 and 7. But if you get any kind of Jacob Davison games against Northern Arizona where he had 41 points and 7 3-point makes, I think that you're going to be able to beat a lot of teams in this relatively weakened Big Sky. This conference is not as strong as it was last year. There is a lot of parity, and I think that we're going to be able to see Eastern Washington take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think it'll be a great matchup, actually, when they're up against Southern Utah. A great front court matchup. Max Peatling was one of those guys. I mean, he's also battled injuries, so I think that his progression has to be assumed. I mean, he's someone who could improve, especially from the outside a little bit, kind of expanding his range. I mean, he's an Aussie, so he's going to be a well-rounded player, probably someone who'll make a big jump this year. Look at the end of the season. I mean, he was rolling, some double-doubles there in the Big Sky tournament.
Yeah, he definitely has a lot of talent. He has a lot of hops, and he has a lot of heart. He's not going to give up. He's not going to get intimidated by a defender. He's going to stick to what he does well, and I respect that. I think that's Australian in him. But this is a year that they can capitalize, and I'm going to keep on harping on this. If they stay healthy, this is a team that can stand up in this Big Sky Conference. Northern Colorado may take a step back. Montana taking a step back. Then there's teams like Weber State and Southern Utah who could challenge them, but I do think that they have the matchups that are advantageous. Kim Aiken Jr., the guard forward, sophomore. He's the guy that I think needs to step up. He's a step-up player. He's got to be that sixth man off the bench, and he's got to challenge for a starting role. I think that he has a lot of potential, and I think that also you're going to have to really rely on your freshmen. There has to be one or two freshmen that come out of this group of 8 that end up producing for this Eastern Washington team. Because if they get the foul trouble, what's going to happen? So,
yeah, I mean, that's really where they're looking to grow, especially getting, and they've got some, 2 sophomores as well looking to make an impact. So Aiken, I think, is probably the best of that sophomore lot. I mean, he had a great Big Sky tournament, certainly, and he's probably going to be moving into the power forward position, I would think, this year as the starter.
Yeah, no, I would hope so, but there's also Tanner Groves. Tanner Groves definitely not as polished, but definitely a bruiser at 6'9", and I think that could be a little bit of a thorn. You don't want to clog up the paint too much with Mason Peeling because you want to be able to clear it out. But then on the other side, obviously, you want to have strong rebounding. So
yeah. Well, Groves, he projects to be a shot blocker if you look at his metrics. I mean, the numbers weren't there because he didn't play as much, but if you expand his minutes, I mean, he would be an elite shot blocker in the country if he plays a lot of minutes this year and plays the same type of game that he has there. So I think that makes him interesting. And, when you mentioned some of the freshmen, I think the one they're kind of looking at the most, there's just a whole list of them, really. Maybe you know more about them, but Tyler Robertson, they got a USA Today Player of the Year out of Idaho, and Ellis Magnuson. So just a lot of names. Something we'll have to learn more about these guys. But after 2 straight years of kind of being runner-up in the Big Sky tournament and seeing Montana down this year, I mean, they're probably expecting to do some damage.
Yeah, absolutely. They got to take advantage of it. And I will say that Abdullahi Mohammed, that is the guy that I look for. That's the guy I'm looking for to make an immediate impact if he can get himself on the floor. But it starts on the practice court. So there are 2 games that I think that are going to be big tests for this Eastern Washington team. They will be playing the Washington Huskies on December 4th. In that game, I do look for them to be double-digit dogs. I hope they are. I hope that Washington is overvalued because this is a team that can keep it close. This is a team that has the bigs to play with Washington, and I believe that their experience and their continuity and chemistry on the court will have an advantage versus Jaden McDaniels and Isaiah Stewart.
Yeah, they lost that game last year by 24 points at Washington. So I think that definitely will be an interesting matchup, Max. So, okay. Well, I think enough coverage there. If you have enough there on Eastern Washington, we can move on to our final West Coast team. We'll be all over. Oh, go ahead.
Just one.
More on the Eagles? Go ahead, brother.
Belmont, November 26th.
Oh, yeah, another game. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so obviously with Casey Alexander, new system, obviously losing some pieces there, but I do think that if Belmont isn't dialed in and Belmont isn't playing at their best with Tyler Scanlon incorporated into the offense, I think that Eastern Washington can steal this game.
Yeah, and I think overall when you look at their season, I mean, you're always going to chalk up injuries as something that is a random. So yeah. I think the expectations are certainly high for Eastern Washington. You got to throw out all that missed time out the window, really, and just say, these guys are back now and ready to make their contribution. And we just hope it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, because I think that if they stay healthy, they're going to play St. Louis and Boston College. Are you telling me with their rosters that they're going to freaking beat Eastern Washington? I don't know about that right now. I got to do a little bit more homework if that's the case.
I don't know about that, brother. Anyways, Max, I want to talk about one of the I'll just say I don't know how to characterize it. I'll just go off the cuff here a little bit with Grand Canyon, but I think they're the most interesting program in the country over the last 5 years or so, and a lot of people, I think our viewers certainly know about them and have a feel for them, maybe even in betting, but I just think nationally, just the way that program has evolved, their crazy group of fans, Marley's active role as the head coach. It's just such an interesting story. I mean, really, they're a winning program. They are, and just now becoming, eligible for everything that they could be eligible for, that type of thing. So last year, 20-14 for Coach Marley, 10-6, which was third. Maybe expectations actually weren't fulfilled for the Roadrunners, but still, just an interesting program. And all their goofy fans, I love watching their games. We actually get them televised a lot out here in San Diego, believe it or not. But the goal hasn't changed. Marley said that he's going to, lead this program to record heights. And I don't mean just for Grand Canyon, because their program, has started from scratch, but he just means how quickly this program could grow and maybe an NCAA tournament team.
Yeah, the coach is definitely a good speech giver, that's for sure, because I don't know where he's been the last couple years in February, early March, but there's this team called the New Mexico State Aggies that keep on putting their thumb on them, being like, no soup for you. No soup for you. And I don't see that changing this year. But that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in watching Grand Canyon, because you know what? There's this one guy. He's from the school named TCU. His name is Jalen Fisher, and I'm anxiously awaiting if he is going to get a waiver to play this year. Because if he plays, that changes everything for me and for a lot of people that are into whack basketball. First off, Jalen Fisher, what do we know about him? Well, he's a floor general. He's a key to the team. He's a guy that's going to hit free throws. He's a guy that's going to score points. Well, if he's in the lineup, that elevates that game, because you know what? The other guy that plays the guard position for Grand Canyon's already been there, shown us what he can do. Probably one of the strongest fucking guys in the WAC. His name's Carlos Johnson. You can't guard him. You can't stop him from getting to where he wants on the court. He's a fucking bully with the basketball. It's like you try and drop a charge, he will freaking just either step around it, or he'll freaking off-balance it, and you'll get called for the freaking blocking foul. It's actually ridiculous how smart and how athletic and agile this guy is. Listen, I watched that Utah Valley game. He had 35 points. He had 9 rebounds. He had 6 3-point fucking makes. What time of year was it? March. What time of year do big players come out? March. Who's a big player? Not stature-wise, but ego-wise and brass-wise, Carlos Johnson. So Dan Marley's very lucky to have him, but you know what? You lost a lot. You lost the Finicky brothers. You lost Trey Treschel. You lost a lot of depth pieces, and I'm just not convinced that guys like Lorenzo Jenkins is going to be able to replace some of that lost physicality and toughness in the front court. Don't get me wrong. Alessandro Lever is a great player, but he's a little soft. 6'10", he's a tower, he's a tree. I'd have to get on a step ladder to punch him in the groin. But you know what? I'm just not into his game. I've seen brilliance from him, but then I saw freaking average, below average, So I'm hoping that he can step up this year. I'm counting on him stepping up this year. Hopefully he's been in the gym doing some freaking work on his body, getting stronger, getting bulker, because I want to see more games where he played against Mississippi Valley State where he put up 26 points. I want to see games that he played against San Diego when he put up 27. Not games where he put up 8 in the freaking game against New Mexico State.
Do you think that's why Lever hit his ceiling early as a sophomore, that he hasn't bulked up, he hasn't worked on his frame? I mean, he's a 6'10" guy. I mean, if you're expecting more, he really has flatlined for these years.
Yeah, absolutely. And all you got to do is look at his offensive efficiency numbers. You see that right there. He has a true offensive efficiency number of 44%. So a guy that size in a conference with the size that they have, you would think that he would have developed a hook shot from 8 feet out, and he'd be dropping it every time, except when the double team comes and he sends it up the 3-point line. Some of these things I just don't understand when I watch this Grand Canyon team, and I'm hoping that they figure it out, or they just are so dominant with the guard play that they don't need it.
Well, I guess he improved a little bit statistically, but for a guy who takes such a high percentage of shots and is such a key player on the team, you would like to see a little bit more, from a guy like that. And I think the thing with Johnson, he kind of emerged as a top-notch player, Max, as the season rolled along. Really started kind of in a six-man role. And I think then they realized or maybe he just continued to improve, but maybe they realized what they had in Johnson, and they really did, obviously, once they got to the WAC tournament.
Absolutely. You definitely look at the game logs and you watch the film, because with a lot of these mid-major schools, you can go back to their websites, watch all their games pretty much on their on-demand streaming site. So I've watched a lot of Grand Canyon this summer. I've watched a lot of teams, but this is a team that you're going to expect them to be laying chalk. They're going to be favorites in a lot of games. They do have some pretty tough, interesting matchups that benefit their roster if they have Jalen Fisher. But that's the biggest thing. Are they going to have Jalen Fisher?
Okay. Well, that's the fun part for us. Are we going to have any fun on this show, Max? Other than your great information, let's play the guessing game.
Yeah.
What's your feel on this situation? We'll just cover it a little bit. I mean, for starters, we don't know if he's going to play. We don't know if he's going to stay healthy. I mean, that's two big obstacles for any player to overcome, especially, I'm not saying he's moving down in class at all. I mean, he's had a big role at a high major program, and now you're getting into a situation like this where, hey, you know what? You have a chance to prove something here if you can stay healthy. Now, the eligibility issue, granting the waiver, that's out of his hands. So we're not going to fault him there if things don't work out. What's your feel? What's going to happen in the Jalen Fisher situation?
I think that if they wanted to keep this Grand Canyon going on an upward climb, I think you got to grant him that eligibility. You got to allow them to really challenge New Mexico State. What do we want in conferences? We want parity. We want battles. We don't want one team to just pull a Tom Brady. We got enough of those in professional sports.
And Max, a knee problem, though? I mean, Fisher, we saw the problems. It's been only 2 years with knee problems. I mean, look, he doesn't have to be that Jalen Fisher. He can be a Jalen Fisher who's still very, very good and makes this program better.
Run the point, shoot threes. That's all we need you to do. That's all that they need him to do. So the bottom line is this is a team that is going to beat teams by margin. They were 57th in the nation last year with a 5.3 average of margin of victory. That's significant in my eyes. That's significant based on the ranking right there. I think that there is going to be value in any games that are lined 132 to 137 towards the over for Grand Canyon. I've looked at game logs for a couple years, and I believe that at these numbers, I think that we are going to have advantages, especially considering that there is some very good scoring pieces on this team on paper. On the court's a different story, but I believe that we're going to be able to see that. The keys for Grand Canyon as a team, it's limit fouls, force the ball handler into turnovers, but you got to do better in OT games. You got to be a better second half scoring team. I believe that in the first half of a basketball game in college basketball, if you can hold your opponent to 30 points or under, you're in a good position. But that means in the second half, you got to get over 40 points. And for a team like Grand Canyon, with their conference schedule and their non-conference schedule based on who's going to be elevating themselves in the WAC, like Cal Baptist and Bakersfield this year, you really got to be on point. So I'll say this. If they can improve in any of these close situation, tight games, I think that they're going to be able to cash some tickets that we don't think. And I believe that live, if we can get lines on them, which is a big if, I think that they're going to provide some value. There are 3 games that I have narrowed out that I think that there is going to be value to bet on Grand Canyon, because either they are going to be underestimated or they're going to be overestimated. So 2 games I believe that they're going to be underestimated is San Diego State. That game on November 13th is the early season game. San Diego State is incorporating a new backcourt. They're obviously very talented on paper. I believe that they will figure it out. But I do think that if you're getting Grand Canyon at 7 points or more, I think you got to get on Grand Canyon on the points there and probably even look at the money line. Obviously, Ramon probably doesn't like this play, but this is just a feel, and obviously it is dependent on Jalen Fisher being in the lineup. A second game. Well, actually, first, let me get your thoughts on this San Diego State game first, Ramon.
I think it's a game that San Diego State would have some concerns with a Grand Canyon team. I think one thing about Grand Canyon, we talk about these guys, the players they lost, but the good players that they're returning, the Fisher situation notwithstanding, I think I got to hold off on that, but I think I agree that, I think they're looking to help out a program like Grand Canyon a little bit. I think it's interesting. This is kind of the first time where Marley kind of downplays his chances of kind of a woe is me type of situation for him this year, whereas before he's always been like, hey, we're Grand Canyon, we've got good guys. I think the one wild card for Grand Canyon is the type of transfers that they get in. I mean, they really get such a high level that even though they really only return 3 guys that saw a bulk of time, they just get an interesting level of transfer in. I mean, they're usually players who are high potential guys with something that's happened along the way. And that's what you see sometimes at some of these upstart programs. And I think that kind of a situation, if you're playing a team like San Diego State, that can sneak up on you. And I called Grand Canyon, of course, the Anteaters. No, what did I call them? The Roadrunners. Of course, they're the Antelopes and they're crazy fans, the Havocs. I don't want to misstate that. But anyways, Max, I just think that they're a team that can pose problems and not necessarily sneak up on people. I don't think that Marley's got anybody fooled anymore at Grand Canyon. I mean, I like watching their games. I mean, they got a really, really interesting program, and I think they can knock off teams like that.
Yeah, and the last game is the game against Liberty. This is a game that I'm a little torn on. I'd definitely be looking towards the over if I can get a number between 132 and 137 in this game. Ordinarily, I'd be looking for the under in this game with Liberty because Liberty plays that type of ball, but I do think that Liberty is going to be a little more fluid offensively. We already talked about that in the last show. And I think that matchup-wise, they're going to have some advantages. I think that Carlos Johnson versus the Liberty guards, Giorgio Pacho Ortiz in particular, is going to be at a disadvantage. And I think that this Liberty team could be getting a lot more respect by December 8th than they get in the beginning of the season.
And they're going to play that one at the big arena. I think that's with it's a doubleheader. I think with some of the other Arizona schools. I don't know which ones right offhand, but I know they're playing that one. Might be one of those televised doubleheaders. Maybe not a nationally networked one, but there's like 2 games at the Talking Stick Arena in Phoenix. And GCU, their fans will be there. Believe me, they might have more fans than those other schools that are there. So anything, Max, with a lot what I mentioned about some of these guys that came in, Dixon from St. John's, Brown from Northwestern, they just get that interesting. Jenkins from Colorado State, they just attract a real interesting mix of transfers really every year, and they kind of reload in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just the state of college basketball today. It's that with these new transfer rules, you have just so much more advantages and opportunities to take. And I think that's what Dan Marley's done. He's played off his NBA career. He's played off his well-known name. He's had some huge moments that you can go back on YouTube and watch. And that's the kind of coach that guys want to play for. That's the kind of coach that he can tell you, I'm going to get you to the NBA. I'm going to get you the professional ranks. That makes sense for a guy that's looking for a second opportunity.
Well, he's not going to be satisfied until he gets that NCAA tournament bid. I mean, it's almost like been the goal when he first set out with this project. I mean, it's really his baby. This whole way. What odds would you give me on a New Mexico State Grand Canyon Conference final? Is it even money?
I'd probably give you like plus 135, plus 130.
Seattle, other team in the mix, or Rio Grande Valley?
I think that I won't say that Rio Grande Valley is in the mix. I would say Bakersfield has an opportunity to really surprise.
Oh,
with DeMonte Buckingham being eligible, coming over from Richmond, I personally think he's newcomer of the year. First off, and second off, I just think that they just play gritty ball. They're really good on home, really rebound, play fundamentally sound. They're the type of team that can really frustrate Grand Canyon and really make Grand Canyon have to play a type of style and physicality that they're not accustomed to or built for. But Seattle definitely has a shot. It would be nice if Matthias Cavas stayed. But I'll say this, Cal Baptist, obviously losing Heating and getting Brandon Boyd in from Idaho State, that's going to be hopefully an upgrade. I don't know about that, but Milan Akua, he's a beast. Little guy, really freaking high energy. I think that Cal Baptist will be tougher this year, but it's going to be Grand Canyon and New Mexico State in the end, in my opinion.
Yeah, interested to see what Takua does, averaging almost 20 points a game last year. Newcomer of the year in the conference, so he'll be a player to watch, certainly. So
yeah, he's definitely playing for some NBA potential. He's trying to be the Chris Clemens. So
interesting. All right, Max. Well, we got a 5-pack. We got a long way to go, brother. We got a long way to go on Maximum College Hoops. So not a lot of time to do it. You're going to see a lot more of us in the days to come. So for Maxwell Smart, I'm Ramon Scott. Thank you for joining us right here on the KingCast channel.
Later, guys.